Hello and welcome back to Tree of Statism. I'm Noel Gutman. Today we're going to be talking about modern military surprises. However, to stay on topic, we are going to have to refrain from talking about a lot of different subjects that are not surprising. For example, ISIS was defeated because its enemies were backed by the major powers. That's not interesting. That did not surprise anyone. Azerbaijan defeated Armenia because it's bigger and has more advanced weapons. This did not surprise anyone. The list goes on, however, we're going to refrain from talking about a bunch of subjects where we were not surprised by the military outcome. The first surprise we're going to be talking about is how the war in Afghanistan ended. When the NATO coalition, decided to withdraw, people expected it to be kind of a toss-up, and no one expected it to end that quickly. On the one hand, you had a secular government backed by resources and advanced technology that the West was supplying it. On the other hand, you had an Islamic Pashtuni nationalist militia by the name of the Taliban, and no one was quite sure how the war would go on, and it was kind of a toss-up and not quite sure which way it will go. One of the things that led to the super quick defeat of the government of Afghanistan was that the Americans pulled out kind of weird. First of all, they did not they did not let their mercenaries stay. Now the Americans call their mercenaries contractors, and these mercenaries were not expected to be frontline troops. They were expected to give tech support and logistical support. And this is very, very important for modern armies because the government of Afghanistan that had advanced tech needed to maintain the advanced tech and needed good logistical supplies for their troops in the different positions. The Americans also withdrew their air force very, very quickly and without telling the government. Nobody was all that surprised by the Taliban victory. It was a toss-up, and the Taliban victory was an option. However, after the first few battles, the line collapsed, and what should have taken about 6 months happened in just a few days. The main reason was that the population was not really eager to serve the government. They did not want a Western-style government that seemed very corrupt, or at least not enough of them wanted it. All governments need a certain amount of compliance from the population. Someone has to be in the army, someone has to be the police, someone has to man the institutions. And if the people do not want to die for the government, seeing perhaps this government and the other government as both bad, but not really something worth dying for, then your government has a problem that the people don't want to serve in the army. If you are no better than the opposition in their eyes, then no amount of weapons will help you, no amount of technology will help you, without compliance from the people. The war in Ukraine surprised everyone who was not paying attention to geopolitics. The people who were paying attention to geopolitics wrote books on the matter, predicting that Russia would invade Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltics. The main reason is that Russia is going through demographic decline and it wants to reach smaller defensible borders to the west, where it is very much exposed with a lot of flatlands, so that it will be able to defend itself even with a small demography. Leading up to the war, Russia and its military conducted a military exercise near Ukraine for several weeks. Everyone saw the invasion coming. Everyone estimated that Ukraine would last a few weeks, maybe a month or two, at most. It could not stand up to a bigger, stronger, 3 times the people, much larger army. It couldn't really stand up to Russia. But the Ukrainians had been preparing for years, and the big surprise with it was that they did far better than everyone expected. The first few things that surprised everyone about the Russian army were the internal problems. They had bad logistical systems, they have bad repair capacities, and they have bad unit coordination. This played in favor for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian army also managed to use its numerical advantage against a smaller but better quality army. Finally, the Ukrainians also used guerrilla tactics and guerrilla units to attack the flank and the logistical lines. On the southern side of the front, the Russians overextended themselves. The Ukrainians used this to attack the logistical lines. They mostly damaged supply trucks. However, hundreds of armored vehicles were abandoned on the field due to fuel shortages. The logistical shortages were translated into abandoned vehicles. And then, this is better than destroying vehicles because the Ukrainian people in their tractors just collected these armored vehicles and transported them to the army. The major assault on Kiev was halted at an unexpected place. They were very much bunkering down. However, the Russians failed to take the nearby airport. That is where Putin wanted to drop 10,000 soldiers to take the city. However, when the elite paratroopers attacked, they found themselves outnumbered by low-quality troops, the National Guard. They lacked the artillery support they needed. They were cut down, and it was understood by the Russian High Command, maybe Putin himself, that Kiev would be a lot harder to take than what was previously thought. The next step of the war was to try to assassinate the Ukrainian President Zelensky. It is not known to the public exactly why the Russians did this. However, I would like to offer you a theory. They thought that after he died, someone else would prefer Ukraine be a proxy of Russia, as long as Russia doesn't destroy it. What they wanted was a kind of agreement like they have with Belarus. 50 million Ukrainians would have a semi-autonomous region that more or less serves Russia. And instead of being enemies, suddenly the manpower pool in Ukraine serves the Russian Empire. At some point, someone in high command started to understand that the war was failing. Putin started conscription in order to add more numbers to his troops. He also moved the army into a defensive position east of the Dnieper. He built fortifications like bunkers and minefields. In 2023, Ukraine's counteroffensive seems to have failed because it seems like the weaker side was attacking a well-fortified enemy. It seems like the 2024 counteroffensive will fail for the same reasons. However, I'm bad at predictions. I'm not going to say that it is inevitable. However, it is very, very likely that the 2024 counteroffensive will fail for the same reasons, because they're attacking a fortified enemy. But this war was surprising enough. Don't let my estimate be the final word. The few lessons we need to learn from the war in Ukraine, especially due to Russia's malfunctions, are first of all that quantity can beat quality. It is not inevitable that quality will defeat the quantity. The next lesson is that overextending your army will cause logistical problems, and the enemy is going to have a fun time attacking exposed trucks, exposed trains, exposed logistical means of logistics. The next thing is that armies need to be coordinated. As much as war is chaos, you need to put an effort into coordinating between your units. And finally, armies need the capacity to repair their technology on the field so that they do not need to take everything back home for repairs, and that they don't need to abandon things on the field. The war in Gaza seems to have reached very, very, very high levels for almost accidental ones. First of all, it should be mentioned that this war should have been a one-day decisive victory for the Israelis. With all due respect to Hamas, and very little is due, and I'm not here to say that the Israelis are incredible and they're the best army in the world. However, it should be mentioned that pickup trucks with machine guns can't compete with tanks. 3,000 Nukba soldiers should not have been able to compete with the Gaza division, backed by artillery, backed by the Air Force, backed by the Israeli army. Uh, this should have been a one-day defeat with very few losses for the Israelis and very much more losses for the Gazans. However, after this one-day victory, there may have been a limited conflict for about a week, a few bombings, some rocket fire in and out. Both sides declare victory, but really it kind of ends without anything decisive, like all the previous rounds. The Israeli failures started with arrogance. The plan that Hamas had was known. It was known that they wanted to attack certain military bases and certain towns. However, the estimate was there would be about five times less targets. It was also known that they wanted to attack the previous Passover because they want to attack during the holidays, to use the fact that soldiers go home for the holidays. This seems odd to foreigners, to non-Israelis, that is. However, soldiers in Israel go home for the holidays. Now, in different armies in foreign countries, they go for an entire year to a foreign country on tour. In Israel, they go home for the holidays. Not all of them, but some of them do. It's kind of a day with less people on the front. And this is the second major war that was started by using this advantage. As for the arrogance, Hamas also declared publicly on television that they wanted to conquer towns. This was kind of blown over as, oh yeah, sure, they want to, but they're like super weak, so they can't. There was also a problem that with the arrogance that there was a major military exercise the week prior to the attack. It was interpreted as a show of force by the Israeli intel. However, it was preparations for the war, just like the major military operation in Russia preceded the war in Ukraine. Now, the last thing, the most important thing to mention, is that at about 12 a.m., about 6 hours before the attack, they were starting to hear that something was going on. They just did not send enough reinforcements, enough police. They did not activate the troops at home to pop back to the front because they estimated there was going to be a nothing burger. That was going to be something very, very small. Something is going on, but not quite the major war of the past 50 years. Since then, the Israelis took a lot of time, almost 3 weeks, before entering what is the most fortified city in the world. The city of Gaza, the entire Gaza Strip, has an extensive tunnel system. They have a lot of small alleyways. They have a lot of small tunnels, kind of hideouts. And this was expected to be a death trap of urban warfare. Israel entered with a lot of caution, and it is doing far better than expected. It uses the rural areas wherever it can. It bombs a lot of things when it needs to. It reshapes the battlefield with bulldozers, and it's going to be one for the history books. It's going to be a battle that's going to be studied for decades to come, because it's an urban warfare battle that's going surprisingly better than expected. The first rule of winning is not losing. If your action will inevitably lead to your defeat, don't do it. Do something else. Be patient. Find a different way. Gaza should not have started this war because of the first rule. That is to say, it was never a toss-up. Gaza had been on the verge of a humanitarian crisis from the third day of the battle, when Israel shut down power and water. From the 9th of October, you've been hearing about people starving, about people who are homeless, about people who don't have enough water or enough electricity, people who are being exposed to the elements. And it was kind of an obvious result that if Israel wanted to, Israel could shut off the power it was supplying Gaza and shut off the water it was supplying Gaza. Gaza also didn't have significant air defense. It can't deal with F-16s. It means that any kind of battle was going to inevitably go to the Israelis. Either that or kind of some weak, not real battle, one of the minor rounds like the last few times, where you kind of, at best, are kind of waiting for the bombings to end. The fact that this battle failed so hard in such a predictable way is what makes the entire war surprising. You would expect the leadership to look at the plan and throw them out for being such a horrible plan. A few conclusions from this war should be mentioned. The first is that a certain amount of quantity is required at all times. If there are times when your soldiers are absent, those are the times when the enemy is going to want to attack. Also, heads of state are not always rational people. Don't expect them to be wise to do the correct thing. They may do stupid, silly things. Finally, the last thing is that when you attack civilians in the homeland, they will deploy soldiers as far away and as brutally as required to stop the attacks on civilians in the homeland. If you like this video, please comment, upvote, and subscribe. If you want to help further, go and watch my other videos. And if you like them as well, do the same over there. Also, please share this video and any other video you might think people might take interest in. If you want to support me further, you can buy my book on Amazon, Ancapistan by Noah Goodman. Thank you for watching, and good night.